Captain Eleanor Ward stared at the screen in her small quarters aboard the Terran Alliance vessel Defying. Her eyes read the words for the 5th time, but her mind still refused to accept them. Earth is now classified as beyond salvation. All Terran Alliance resources will be diverted to viable colonies. Recovery efforts are terminated effective immediately. The Galactic Council extends its sympathies. Eleanor's hand clenched into a fist. 6 months. It had been only 6 months since the Cronin invasion began, and already the mighty Galactic Council was writing off an entire planet. Her planet. Her home. She looked at the small picture frame on her desk. A faded image of a farmhouse surrounded by Nebraska cornfields. Mom, Dad, and her younger brother Alan might still be alive down there, waiting for help that would never come if the Council had its way. The door chime interrupted her thoughts. "Enter," she said, quickly wiping away a tear. Lieutenant Jack Rivera stepped inside, his normally relaxed face now serious. "You saw the transmission?" he asked. Eleanor nodded. "The Council is abandoning Earth." "They can't do that," Rivera said, his voice rising. "There are still millions of people down there." "They just did." Eleanor stood up and walked to the small window. From here, she could see the massive Galactic Council station that the Defiant was currently docked at. Hundreds of ships came and went, carrying resources and refugees to worlds the Council deemed worthy of saving. But not Earth. Not anymore. "Captain, what are we going to do?" Rivera asked. Eleanor turned to face him. In her 10 years of service, she had always followed orders. She had been the perfect Terran Alliance officer. But now, looking at Rivera's eyes, she made a decision that would change everything. "We're going back," she said simply. Rivera's eyes widened. "Back to Earth." "But the Council just ordered all ships to stay away." "I don't care what they ordered." Eleanor's voice was steady now. "I'm not giving up on our home. Not while there's still a chance. This would be against direct orders. We be deserters." Eleanor nodded slowly. "I know. I'm not asking you to come with me." Rivera was quiet for a moment. Then a small smile appeared on his face. "My family's in Boston. Or they were. Of course I'm coming." Over the next 12 hours, Eleanor quietly spoke with key crew members she trusted. Engineer Olivia Clark, who had lost her wife when New York fell. Communications specialist Daniel Phillips, whose entire family had been in Sydney. Medical officer Lily Mason, whose parents had been visiting Chicago when the Cronins hit. One by one, they agreed to join her. Some crew chose to stay behind, and Eleanor didn't blame them. She arranged quiet transfers for them, making sure they wouldn't face questions about her plans. The night before their planned departure, Eleanor sat alone in her quarters again, looking at the ship manifests. They had enough fuel, enough supplies. The Defiant wasn't a large ship, but it was fast and well armed. Maybe, just maybe, they could make a difference. Her computer beeped with an incoming message from Admiral Blake, her direct superior. She hesitated, then opened it. "Captain Ward, intelligence suggests you may be planning something foolish. Remember your oath to the Alliance. Earth is lost. Don't throw away your career and your life on a hopeless cause." "That's an order." Eleanor closed the message without replying. She looked once more at the picture of her family home, then at the stars visible through her small window. "I'm coming home," she whispered, "and I'm bringing help." In the morning, while the station crew changed shifts, the Defiant quietly detached from its dock. By the time the alarm sounded, they were already making the jump to light speed, on course for the planet that everyone else had given up on. The alarm on the bridge of the Defiant blared as 3 Galactic Council ships appeared on the scanner. Captain Eleanor Ward leaned forward in her command chair, her face tight with concentration. "They're hailing us." Communications specialist Daniel Phillips said, "It's Admiral Blake." "Ignore it," Eleanor replied. She turned to Lieutenant Jack Rivera at the navigation station. "How long until we can make another jump?" "Drive needs 5 more minutes to cool down, Captain," Rivera said, his fingers moving quickly over the controls. Engineer Olivia Clark's voice came through the comm system. "Captain, those council ships are faster than us. We can't outrun them in normal space." Eleanor knew Clark was right. The Defiant was a solid ship, but it wasn't built for speed. If the council ships caught them, they would be arrested, stripped of rank, possibly even imprisoned. Earth would remain abandoned. Options? Eleanor asked, looking around at her small crew. The bridge felt different with just 4 of them instead of the usual 12. Everyone was doing multiple jobs, and the tension was thick in the air. Medical Officer Lily Mason looked up from the sensor station she was covering. "There's an unmapped wormhole about 2 minutes ahead. It's unstable, but it might lose them." A wormhole. Rivera turned in his chair, eyes wide. "We have no idea where it leads. Exactly why they won't follow us," Eleanor said. "Set course for the wormhole." As Rivera adjusted their course, the ship shuddered under a warning shot from the lead council vessel. "They're charging weapons for a disabling shot," Mason reported. Eleanor pressed the ship-wide comm. "All hands, secure for emergency maneuvers." The Defiant rolled sharply as Rivera pushed the engines beyond safety limits. The council ships followed, closing the gap with every second. "Wormhole in 30 seconds, Rivera called out. Another blast rocked the ship. Sparks flew from a console at the back of the bridge. "Shields at 60%, Mason said. Phillips looked up from his station. "Message from Admiral Blake. He says this is our last warning. They'll fire to disable our engines next." Eleanor gripped the arms of her chair. "Tell the Admiral he can court-martial me when we get back. If we get back." The wormhole loomed ahead, a swirling tear in space that pulsed with blue and purple energy. It looked nothing like the stable, mapped wormholes the Alliance used for regular travel. This was wild, dangerous, and exactly what they needed. "Wormhole in 5 seconds, Rivera counted down. 4, 3, 2, 1. The Defiant plunged into the swirling vortex. The ship shook violently, and alarms blared from every station. The view screen filled with streaking lights and twisted space. Eleanor felt like her body was being pulled in a dozen different directions at once. And then, suddenly, it was over. The Defiant burst out of the wormhole into unknown space. The stars in the view screen formed unfamiliar patterns. "Damage report," Eleanor said, unclenching her hands from the chair. Clark's voice came through, strained and tired. "Drive is severely damaged, Captain. We can make 1, maybe 2 more jumps before it fails completely. Life support. Functioning, but we lost part of the food storage in the jump." Eleanor stood and walked to the navigation console. "Where are we, Jack?" Rivera shook his head as he studied the scanner. "I don't recognize any of these star patterns. We're way off any mapped routes. Can we still reach Earth?" Rivera worked the calculations. "Yes. 1 more jump should get us close enough. But, Captain," he looked up at her, his expression serious, "with the drive damage, we might not have enough power to leave Earth orbit again. This could be a one-way trip." Eleanor looked around at her crew. They all understood what that meant. If they continued, they might never leave Earth again. They would be stranded on a ruined planet, with no hope of rescue. "We were never planning on leaving again anyway," Eleanor said quietly. "Set course for home." The Defiant entered Earth's atmosphere under the cover of a strong magnetic storm. Captain Eleanor Ward stood at the view screen, her heart heavy at the sight below. Major cities lay in ruins. Strange blue-green structures rose from what once was San Francisco. The beautiful coastline she remembered was now covered with alien formations that glowed in the darkness. "Radiation levels are high in most major cities," Medical Officer Lily Mason reported, her voice soft with shock. "The Cronins have changed the environment significantly in just 6 months." Eleanor turned to communications specialist Daniel Phillips. "Any human signals? Anything at all?" Phillips adjusted his equipment, focusing intensely on his task. After several tense minutes, his head snapped up. Yes, it's faint, but I'm picking up old-style radio transmissions coming from somewhere in the Rocky Mountains. Set course, Eleanor ordered immediately. And keep us low. I don't want any Cronin patrols spotting us. Lieutenant Jack Rivera guided the damaged ship carefully through cloud cover, staying below Cronin sensor range. The mountains came into view, their familiar shapes a strange comfort among all the alien changes. The signal is coming from near that valley, Phillips said, pointing at the screen. They found a small clearing to land the ship, about 2 miles from the signal source. Eleanor assembled a ground team consisting of herself, Rivera, and Mason. Engineer Olivia Clark would stay behind to work on repairs and keep the ship ready for a quick escape if needed. Keep the engines warm, Eleanor told Clark as they prepared to leave. If we're not back in 6 hours, or if Cronins show up, take off and hide the ship. Don't wait for us. Clark nodded, though her eyes said she would never leave them behind. The 3 officers stepped out onto Earth's soil for the first time in years. The air smelled different, metallic and strange. They'd wore protective gear due to the radiation. But even so, Eleanor felt a chill as they began hiking toward the signal source. The forest was eerily quiet. No birds sang. No insects buzzed. Many trees were dead or covered with a strange blue fungus. Twice they had to hide as Cronin drones passed overhead, searching the area with scanning beams. After nearly 2 hours of careful movement, they reached a sheer rock face. According to their instruments, the signal came from inside the mountain itself. There must be an entrance, Eleanor said, running her hand along the rough stone. Rivera discovered a narrow crack almost hidden by fallen rocks. It was just wide enough for a person to squeeze through. Inside, a dark tunnel sloped downward into the mountain. Could be a trap, Mason whispered. Could be survivors, Eleanor replied. She activated her light and led the way into the darkness. The tunnel continued for about 50 yards before opening into a wider passage. Suddenly, bright lights blinded them. Eleanor raised her hands, squinting against the glare. Don't move, a gruff voice commanded. Identify yourselves. Captain Eleanor Ward of the Terran Alliance vessel Defying, she called out steadily. We're human. We've come back to help. A long silence followed. The lights dimmed enough for Eleanor to make out several people pointing old Earth weapons at them. The man in front stepped closer, his weathered face showing disbelief. Terran Alliance. You're from the Council. His voice was filled with bitterness. They abandoned us months ago. We're not here on Council orders, Eleanor explained. We came against their wishes. We came to help. The man studied them carefully, his eyes lingering on their uniforms and equipment. Finally, he lowered his weapon. I'm Samuel Grant, former United States Army commander. Welcome to what's left of humanity's resistance. He gestured for them to follow. Come with me. There are about 200 of us down here. And you're the first help we've seen since the sky fell. As they walked deeper into the mountain complex, Eleanor saw hope flicker in the eyes of dirty, tired people who lined the passageway to see the newcomers. Children stared at their uniforms with wonder. An old woman reached out to touch Eleanor's sleeve, as if to confirm she was real. We thought everyone had forgotten about us, Grant said quietly. We thought we were alone. You're not alone anymore, Eleanor promised. We're here to stay. Over the next 2 weeks, Captain Eleanor Ward and her crew integrated with the mountain-based survivors. Engineer Olivia Clark helped improve their power systems. Communications specialist Daniel Phillips worked to connect other survivor groups they discovered across the continent. Medical officer Lily Mason treated the sick and injured with supplies from the Defiant. Eleanor studied a rough map with Samuel Grant in what used to be a storage room, now serving as their command center. Small lights marked known human settlements. There are more survivors than we thought, Eleanor said. At least 20 groups like yours. Grant nodded. But we've had no way to coordinate. The Cronins control all major communication networks. They hunt down any group that makes too much noise. "We can change that now," Eleanor replied. "Phillips has modified our ship's communication system. We can bounce signals off the upper atmosphere without the Cronins detecting them." "Having ship technology makes a huge difference," Grant admitted. "But we're still desperately short on medical supplies." Eleanor pointed to a marker on the map. "This hospital, in what was Denver, is it still standing?" "Parts of it. The Cronins don't seem interested in it, but it's in the middle of their territory." Grant frowned. "It would be incredibly dangerous." "We need those supplies," Eleanor said firmly. "I'll leave a small team." The next day, Eleanor, Lieutenant Jack Rivera, and a resistance fighter named Zoe Martinez set out in a small ground vehicle covered with mud and plant matter to disguise it from Cronin scanners. They drove through ruins of suburbs, now overgrown with strange blue-green vegetation. The air grew thicker with alien spores the closer they got to Denver. The hospital was still partially intact, its upper floors collapsed, but the basement levels accessible. They parked their vehicle in a hidden spot and approached on foot. "Stay alert," Eleanor whispered as they entered through a broken emergency exit. In and out as fast as possible. The hospital corridors were dark and filled with dust. They used small lights and moved carefully down to the pharmacy level. Rivera kept watch while Eleanor and Martinez filled their bags with antibiotics, painkillers, surgical supplies, and other essentials. They were almost finished when Rivera hissed a warning. Movement outside. Lots of it. Through a cracked window, they saw a Cronin patrol moving toward the hospital. The aliens were tall, insect-like creatures with blue exoskeletons, but something was different about them. "They don't look like the ones we fought in space," Eleanor whispered. "Their bodies are different." "They're adapting," Martinez said. "Each generation changes to match Earth's environment. The older ones needed full environmental suits. These newer ones can breathe our air." The Cronins entered the building. Eleanor and her team retreated deeper into the hospital, looking for another exit. They found a service tunnel, but it was partially collapsed. "We'll have to dig through," Rivera said, already moving rubble. They worked quickly but quietly. The sounds of Cronin searchers grew closer. Just as they cleared enough space to squeeze through, 3 Cronins appeared at the far end of the corridor. "Go!" Eleanor shouted, firing her weapon at the ceiling above the aliens. The roof collapsed, temporarily blocking the Cronins, but not before one of their energy weapons hit Rivera in the shoulder. They escaped through the tunnel and reached their vehicle. Martinez drove while Eleanor tried to stop Rivera's bleeding in the back seat. "How bad?" Rivera asked through gritted teeth. "You'll live," Eleanor said, applying pressure to the wound. "Just stay with me." They made it back to the mountain base, but Rivera's condition worsened. The Cronin weapon had infected the wound with something unknown. Mason worked through the night to save him. During Rivera's treatment, a heated argument broke out among the survivors. Eleanor heard angry voices from the main cavern and went to investigate. "This is what happens when we fight back," a man was shouting. "We should be hiding, not attacking. So we just wait to die." Another responded. "The Cronins are too powerful," the first man continued. "Look what happened on this simple supply run. We can't win this fight." Eleanor stepped forward. "We don't have to win every fight. We just have to survive." The man turned to her, anger in his eyes. "Easy for you to say. You could have stayed safe up there in space. My family died when they came. My children. My family was in Chicago when it fell," Eleanor said quietly. "My parents. My brother. But I refuse to believe they're gone until I see proof, and I refuse to give up on this planet." The room fell silent. After a moment, Samuel Grant spoke. "We continue the fight. We use the supplies they brought back to heal our sick. And tomorrow, we start planning our next move." As the crowd dispersed, Eleanor stayed behind, looking at the crude map of Earth with its scattered lights of human resistance. So few lights, so much darkness. but still not extinguished. Engineer Olivia Clark studied the strange piece of Cronin technology they had recovered during a raid last week. It was shaped like a curved blade with pulsing blue lights along its edge. She had been working on it day and night in a small lab they had set up in the mountain base. Captain Eleanor Ward entered the lab, carrying 2 cups of the bitter tea the survivors had learned to make from local plants. "Any progress?" she asked, setting 1 cup beside Clark. "I think I've figured it out," Clark said, her eyes red from lack of sleep. "This isn't a weapon. It's part of a terraforming device." She pointed to the glowing blue elements. "See these? They're changing the molecular structure of our atmosphere, our soil, even our water." Eleanor frowned. "They're transforming Earth to suit themselves." "Yes, but that's not all." Clark pulled up a diagram on her tablet. "I've analyzed tissue samples from the newer Cronins that Lieutenant Rivera encountered. They're not just adapting naturally. They're using our genetic material to speed up their evolution." "Our genetic material?" Eleanor felt a chill run through her body. "You mean they're harvesting humans?" Clark finished grimly. "I believe they're keeping some alive as test subjects. It's the only explanation for how quickly they're adapting." Eleanor's mind raced. If the Cronins were keeping humans alive, then maybe. "We need to find where they're holding these people," she said firmly. Communications specialist Daniel Phillips helped them locate a Cronin processing facility about 30 miles away. His monitoring had picked up unusual energy signatures consistent with large-scale biological experimentation. 3 days later, Eleanor led a small stealth team consisting of herself, Clark, and resistance fighter Zoe Martinez. They approached the facility under cover of night, wearing protective suits against the alien spores that filled the air. "Remember, this is reconnaissance only," Eleanor whispered as they reached the outer perimeter. "We get in, gather information, and get out without being seen." They slipped past external sensors using technology from the Defiant that masked their heat signatures. The facility loomed before them, a massive structure of metal and that same strange blue-green material that seemed to be half-building, half-living organism. They found an entry point through a ventilation shaft and crawled inside. The air was thick and humid. Strange sounds echoed through the corridors. Mechanical hums mixed with what might have been voices. Moving deeper into the facility, they came to a large chamber filled with rows of transparent pods. Each pod contained a human, suspended in clear fluid, connected to tubes and wires. Monitoring devices showed their vital signs. "They're alive," Martins whispered in horror. Clark moved to a control panel and began downloading data. "They're extracting DNA, proteins, even neural patterns," she said quietly, using it to modify their own genetic structure. Eleanor moved among the pods, her heart pounding. The faces were pale, eyes closed as if in deep sleep. Men, women, even children floated in the alien suspension. Then she stopped, her breath catching in her throat. In a pod near the center was a face she recognized instantly, her brother Alan. "He's alive," she whispered, placing her hand on the cool surface of the pod. Alan's face was thinner, paler, but unmistakably him. The monitor showed a steady heartbeat. "We have to get them out." "There are hundreds of pods," Martinez said. "We can't free them all." "We'll come back with more people," Eleanor promised. "But we're taking my brother and as many others as we can right now." Clark looked up from the control panel. "I think I can deactivate this section without triggering the main alarms." With Clark's guidance, they managed to open 12 pods, including Alan's. The people inside were weak and confused after months in suspension, but alive. They helped them into protective suits and started making their way back to the exit. They had almost reached the outer perimeter when alarms suddenly blared throughout the facility. Red lights flashed and heavy doors began to close. "They've detected us," Clark shouted over the noise. "Run," Eleanor ordered, helping her barely conscious brother move faster. Cronin guards appeared ahead, firing energy weapons. Martins returned fire, creating cover as they ran for their escape vehicle. In the chaos of the firefight, Eleanor and the freed prisoners made it to the vehicle, but she lost sight of Clark and Martinez. "Where are they?" she shouted, scanning the area. A sudden explosion rocked the side of the facility. Martinez appeared from the smoke, half carrying Clark, whose leg was bleeding. "Go!" Martinez yelled as more Cronins emerged from the facility. Eleanor hesitated, torn between helping them and protecting the freed prisoners. "We'll find another way out," Martinez insisted, pulling Clark behind cover. "Get these people to safety." With the Cronins closing in, Eleanor made the agonizing decision to drive away, vowing to return for her friends. As their vehicle sped through the night, Eleanor looked back at the facility becoming smaller in the distance, the sound of weapons fire still echoing in her ears. Eleanor woke with a start, her head pounding. The last thing she remembered was their escape vehicle hitting something hard after a Cronin energy blast struck nearby. She looked around, trying to get her bearings. She was lying in a small clearing, surrounded by strange blue-tinted vegetation. No sign of the vehicle or the rescued prisoners, including her brother. Had they continued without her? Had they been recaptured? Eleanor checked herself for injuries. A nasty cut on her forehead had stopped bleeding, and her ribs ached when she breathed. Her communication device was shattered. The protective suit she had worn was torn in several places, exposing her to the alien spores in the air. Looking at the position of the sun, she figured she had been unconscious for hours. Standing carefully, she tried to determine which direction to go. The resistance base was roughly 200 miles north, through Cronin-controlled territory. Without a vehicle, communications, or supplies, it would be a brutal journey. One step at a time, she told herself, and began walking north. For 3 days, Eleanor moved carefully through the transformed landscape of what used to be Colorado. She avoided Cronin patrols, drank from streams using a small filter from her emergency kit, and ate preserved food from the same kit. When that ran out, she risked eating some earth fruits that hadn't been completely changed by the alien environment. On the 4th day, she developed a fever. The alien spores were affecting her despite the medications in her kit. She pushed on, growing weaker but determined not to stop. By the 6th day, Eleanor was stumbling more than walking. She reached the outskirts of a small town that had been mostly destroyed. Buildings were collapsed, streets cracked and overgrown, with the blue-green vegetation that marked Cronin influence. She needed to rest. Finding a house that was still partly standing, Eleanor broke in through a back window and collapsed on a dusty couch. Her fever was worse, and her vision blurred at the edges. She knew she needed to keep moving, but her body refused to cooperate. A noise startled her awake some time later. Eleanor's hand went to her weapon, but her movements were slow from fever. "Are you sick?" a small voice asked. Eleanor blinked, trying to clear her vision. A boy of about 10 stood in the doorway, watching her cautiously. He was thin but appeared healthy, wearing dirty clothes that were too big for him. "Who are you?" Eleanor asked, her voice raspy. "Leo," the boy said simply. "You shouldn't be here. Cronin drones come through town every night." Eleanor tried to sit up. "Are there other people here?" Leo shook his head. "Just me now. Everyone else left or was taken." He came closer, studying her uniform. "You're from space." It wasn't a question. Eleanor nodded. "I need to get to the mountains. There are people there who can help." "The mountains are far," Leo said. "And you're sick from the blue stuff." "The spores," Eleanor confirmed. "I lost my protective suit." Leo disappeared and returned moments later with a bottle of water and something wrapped in cloth. "Take these," he said, offering both items. "The pills help with the blue sickness. My dad made them before he was taken." Eleanor took the homemade medicine gratefully. "Thank you. You should come with me, Leo. It's not safe for you alone." The boy hesitated. "I've been hiding for months. I know how to stay away from them." "I'm sure you do," Eleanor said. "But there are other children at the base. Food, safety, We look after each other there." That night, after the Cronin drones had passed, Leo led Eleanor to a hidden cellar where he had been living. He had collected an impressive amount of supplies, canned food, water, even some medical items. "My dad was a doctor," Leo explained. "He taught me things before the aliens came." Eleanor's fever began to improve with Leo's medicine. As they prepared to leave the next morning, she studied a map Leo had drawn showing Cronin patrol routes. "How do you know all this?" she asked. "I watch them," Leo said with a shrug. "They follow the same paths. And they don't look up much." Eleanor smiled, the first time in days. "You're quite the spy, Leo." With the boys' help, plotting a safe route north would be possible. It would still be a long, dangerous journey, but Eleanor now had something she had nearly lost: hope. "We leave at dawn," she said, carefully folding Leo's map. "And Leo, thank you for saving my life." The boy nodded seriously. "You're going to fight them, right? The blue ones who took my family." "Yes," Eleanor promised. "That's exactly what we're going to do." After 2 weeks of careful travel, hiding from Cronin patrols by day and moving by night, Eleanor and Leo finally reached the mountain base. The guards at the hidden entrance were shocked to see her alive. "Captain Ward," one exclaimed, "we thought you were dead." Eleanor, thin and exhausted, managed a tired smile. "Not yet. This is Leo. He saved my life." They were rushed inside. Lieutenant Jack Rivera, now recovered from his wound, embraced Eleanor with tears in his eyes. "We sent search parties, but there was no trace of you." "What happened to the others?" Eleanor asked urgently. "My brother, Clark, and Martinez." Rivera's face grew serious. "Your brother is here. He's still weak but recovering. We haven't found Clark or Martinez yet, but we're still looking." Medical Officer Lily Mason insisted on examining both Eleanor and Leo immediately. While they were in the medical area, Eleanor was overjoyed to reunite with her brother Alan. Though still pale and thin from his time in the Cronin pod, his eyes were clear, and he held her hand tightly. "You came back for me," he said softly, "just like you promised when you left for space." Later that day, Samuel Grant called an emergency meeting. Eleanor was surprised to see communications specialist Daniel Phillips standing next to Grant, his face grim. On a table before them sat a Cronin data device. "While you were gone, we intercepted this from a downed Cronin ship," Grant explained. "Phillips has been working to decode it." Phillips activated the device. Holographic images filled the room. Official Galactic Council transmissions, logs of meetings and communications with Cronin leaders. "It's worse than we thought," Phillips said quietly. "The Council didn't just abandon Earth. They made a deal with the Cronins." Murmurs of shock spread through the room. Eleanor stepped forward, studying the images. "What kind of deal?" "A non-aggression pact," Phillips explained. "The Cronins agreed to limit their expansion to our solar system only. In exchange, the Council would withdraw all forces from Earth and—" he paused, looking sick, "allow the Cronins to use humanity as test subjects for their adaptation technology." "They sacrificed us," Alan whispered. "Our own people sold us out." Eleanor remembered her superior officers, the ones who had tried to stop her from returning to Earth. Had they known? She suspected some had. "There's more," Grant said. "Show them the rest, Phillips." Phillips activated another file. It showed detailed plans of the main Cronin base in North America, a massive structure built over what used to be Denver. "This is their primary adaptation center," Phillips explained. "They're processing thousands of humans there, using them to create the next generation of Cronins, a generation that will be perfectly adapted to Earth's environment." "And once they're adapted?" Eleanor asked, already knowing the answer. "They won't need the test subjects anymore," Phillips confirmed. "The humans will be disposed of." Silence fell over the room. The resistance fighters looked at each other, the weight of this information crushing down on them. So what do we do? Rivera finally asked. We can't defeat their entire force. We don't have the weapons or the numbers. Eleanor studied the holographic plans, thinking hard. We can't defeat them directly, no. But we might be able to expose the Council's betrayal to the rest of the galaxy. She turned to Engineer Clark's assistant, who had been working on the Defiance repairs. How's our ship doing? We've managed to repair some systems using salvaged Chronon technology, the young engineer reported. We could get it flying again. But the communications array is still damaged. What if we don't need long-range communications? Eleanor looked at the Chronon data device. What if we could use their own network against them? Broadcast the evidence of the Council's betrayal to every civilization in the galaxy, Phillips said, understanding dawning on his face. Show everyone what they did to Earth. Exactly, Eleanor confirmed. The Council violated their own most sacred principles. Other worlds would be outraged. It would mean sacrificing the Defiant, Rivera pointed out. We'd have to fly directly into their main communication hub. It would be a suicide mission. And if we do nothing, billions die anyway, Eleanor replied. At least this way, Earth might have a chance. Grant looked around the room at the gathered survivors. We need to put it to a vote. This affects all of us. One by one, the resistance leaders voiced their opinions. Some were afraid, some angry, but all understood the stakes. By the end of the meeting, the decision was made. They would fight back, not just for their own survival, but to expose the truth to the entire galaxy. Dawn broke over the mountain base as final preparations were made. The Defiant, patched together with salvaged Chronon technology, waited in the clearing. Its normally sleek hull was now a patchwork of repairs, but the engines hummed with power. Captain Eleanor Ward stood with Samuel Grant as resistance fighters loaded the last of the supplies. They had spent a week planning this mission, their most dangerous yet. The diversion team is in position, Grant reported. They'll attack the Chronon outpost at 800, drawing their patrols away from your flight path. Eleanor nodded. And the broadcast package. Phillips has it ready. All the evidence of the Council's betrayal, formatted to transmit across all Chronon channels simultaneously. Grant paused, then added, We found Engineer Clark. Eleanor's heart jumped. She's alive. Yes, Martine is too. They were being held at a smaller facility. Our raid last night freed them along with 30 other prisoners. Relief flooded through Eleanor. I want to see them. There's no time, Grant said gently. Clark is injured but stable. She asked me to give you this. He handed Eleanor a small device. She said it will help boost your transmission signal. Once installed, it will let you broadcast not just to the Chronon network, but to every communication system in this sector of the galaxy. Eleanor pocketed the device, touched by her friend's contribution even while recovering. Thank you. Lieutenant Jack Rivera approached, now wearing his Terran Alliance uniform for the first time since they arrived on Earth. Ship is ready, Captain. All systems functional. Crew. Volunteers only, as you ordered. 10 of us total. Eleanor's brother Alan walked up, still thin but much stronger than when she'd first rescued him. I'm coming too, he said firmly. Alan? Eleanor began. Don't argue, Ellie. I've been studying the Chronon systems with Phillips. You need someone who understands their tech. And that's me. Eleanor wanted to protest, to keep him safe, but she recognized the determination in his eyes, the same Ward family stubbornness she possessed. All right, she agreed, but you stay on the bridge with me. As they prepared to board, Leo appeared. The boy had become a valuable member of the Resistance, his knowledge of Chronon patrol patterns proving invaluable. I mapped the air currents for you, he said, handing Eleanor a tablet. These routes have the least Chronon activity. Eleanor knelt down to his level. Thank you, Leo. You've been very brave. The boy suddenly hugged her tight. Come back, okay? I'll try, she promised, knowing it might be one she couldn't keep. Inside the Defiant, the small crew took their positions, Rivera at navigation, Phillips at communications, Alan at the sensor station. Eleanor sat in the command chair, feeling the familiar vibration of the ship beneath her. "All stations report," she ordered. One by one, they confirmed readiness. The ship lifted off, rising above the trees just as explosions sounded in the distance, Grant's diversion beginning right on schedule. The Defiant accelerated into the sky, staying low to avoid early detection. As they approached the massive Cronin Central Facility, alarm signals began blaring. "They'd spotted us," Rivera reported tensely. "Cronin interceptors launching." "Stay on course," Eleanor commanded. "Maximum speed." The ship shuddered as enemy fire struck their shields. Rivera's hands flew across the controls, executing evasive maneuvers while maintaining their approach vector. "Shields at 60%. Ellen called out. "We need to get closer to their central communication hub," Phillips said, working frantically at his station. Eleanor activated Clark's device, connecting it to the ship's systems. "How close?" "At least within 1 mile of the central spire," Phillips replied. More hits rocked the ship. A console exploded in sparks, injuring a crew member. "Shields failing," Ellen shouted. "Almost there," Rivera said through gritted teeth. "Just a little closer." The massive Cronin facility filled their view screen now, its central spire rising high above the surrounding structures. Dozens of Cronin ships converged on them from all directions. "We're in range," Phillips announced. "Broadcast now," Eleanor ordered. Phillips activated the transmission. The evidence of the Council's betrayal, the secret meetings, the agreement to sacrifice Earth, the violation of their own principles, began streaming to every communication device across the sector. "It's working," Ellen exclaimed. "The signal is breaking through all their firewalls." Another hit struck the Defiant, more devastating than the others. Warning lights flashed across every console. "Engine core destabilizing," Rivera reported grimly. "We have minutes at most." Eleanor made a quick decision. "Turn us around. Back to Earth." "Captain," Rivera questioned. "If we're going down, we're going down on our home planet," Eleanor said firmly. As the damaged Defiant began its descent back toward Earth, Phillips suddenly straightened at his station. "Captain, I'm receiving transmissions, dozens of them, from independent worlds across the sector. They've broken from the Council. They're coming to help Earth." The crew stared in disbelief as the first non-Cronin ships appeared on their scanners, engaging the Cronin fleet in orbit. "It worked," Alan whispered. Eleanor watched as more Allied ships arrived, their weapons firing upon the Cronin vessels. For the first time in months, she allowed herself to feel something she had almost forgotten: hope.